Say and spell your complete name.
Yes, the name is John Litchfield, spelled John. Last name is Litchfield, John Litchfield.
Okay. And highest rank served in the 10th Mountain Division.
Captain.
Okay. And the year that you
Started, well,
oh, go ahead.
Yes, Captain began as a buck private, then went up to a corporal and sent to OCS and graduated as a second lieutenant, promoted to first, and then the captain later.
Okay, let's start by having you talk just a little bit about your experiences at Dartmouth and skiing.
Well, one of the reasons that, of course, I attended Dartmouth was because of skiing. As a young man in Maine, I was skiing along with the other kids in the neighborhood, and mainly ski jumping and so forth. And so that led to, as soon as I was graduated from high school, skied on the team there for 4 years, four-way competition in those days. A good friend of the family who was a Dartmouth graduate apparently had some influence on me, so I went to Dartmouth, entering in 1935. Graduated in 1937, skied on the team in all those years, specializing in the Nordic combined, which is ski jumping and cross country. And that led to my meeting a gentleman by the name of Friedel Pfeiffer, who was asked to replace Hans Hauser in Sun Valley. And I met Friedel through my roommate, Dick Durrance, whom I roomed with my junior and senior year at Dartmouth. So I went to work teaching skiing at Sun Valley immediately after college, first one of 1939, and taught there until joining the military in the spring, April 15th of 1942. There were about 25 of us, Percy Rideout being one. Percy was a Dartmouth graduate. And most of the 25 found themselves training at Camp Roberts, boot training at Camp Roberts, California. From there, some of us attended OCS school, the Fort Benning School for Boys, and were assigned after that to various troops. I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, reporting in at Camp Hale as a second lieutenant in December of 1942. At that time, the camp hadn't been completely finished, and people were arriving on a daily basis to bring the then Mountain Training Center up to full strength. The Mountain Training Center became eventually the 10th Light Division, and with 3 regiments and attached troops, integral troops, I would say. Anyway, the assignment, of course, was sort of peculiar to my background in skiing, outdoor life that I had enjoyed as a young man in Maine, and continued up to that point.
What was it that really drew you to being in the 10th?
Well, I think probably it's the same, you might say the reason that's common to most of the people that were there, because they wanted to be with people of their own likes and dislikes, and serving in the military, which we realized was going to be a unique experience. We felt that being with people who loved outdoor life, and in particular skiers, would be, let's say, more compatible to our philosophy of life at that point.
What was that philosophy of life?
Well, I think, basically, of course, the association still in the outdoor ways of life, which of course the military is, but especially with an organization which had as a base the recruitment and utility and usefulness of skiers to the military effort.
When you look at the 10th, how are they different from Flatlanders as a division?
Well, I would say in a sense of their aspect of living in the outdoors and things like hunting, fishing, rock climbing, skiing, athletic endeavors, golf, tennis, and so forth. Most of the people were in pretty decent physical condition as young men because of their life. And the other part of it is, of course, association with people that like sports and the attitude of outdoor life established a common bond immediately. And that is very important in the process of training together, teamwork, and so forth that concerns military training.
Did you feel like because they had shared hardships and shared experiences, that their common bond went deeper than perhaps other divisions?
Well, of course, we trained for a considerable period of time and began to wonder whether we were going to be utilized or not. But there were some good things that came out of that. We got to know each other very, very well, and that's important for teamwork and military operations. And our training obviously was pretty intense at high altitude, summer and winter, so we got to be in terrific shape, which is all important, of course, in combat operations. So the idea of combined with the experience we had as young men prior to that, established a bond through the rigorous and hard training.
How about if you just elaborate just a little more about how the 10th shared hardship prepared them for when they did get into battle?
One of the things I think that enabled the 10th Mountain Division to accomplish in a short space of time, really, in combat in Italy, was the fact that we were all pretty much outdoor people to begin with. We trained together for 2.5 or so many years, and we got to know one another, and we understood individual strengths and weaknesses, all of us. The other thing was the intense training at high altitude in Colorado. We were in terrific shape. And the knowledge that we had gained militarily on how to use the terrain in the mountains for our benefit was a tremendous, along with our physical well-being, was a tremendous value to our success. And it showed. The division moved rapidly, and the general, the commanding general, kept the division moving, and realizing that not only to get its mission accomplished in the shortest, but it really saved lives. Infantry training is very important with this understanding. Infantry has to move. The minute it gets bogged down, then you get heavy casualties. And the general knew all about this because he had experienced that kind of bogged down warfare, trench warfare during World War I. And this attitude, combined with the high morale of the men and their excellent physical condition, their knowledge of how to use the mountains in their favor, enabled the division to be as successful as it was in the short period of time that it was employed.
Very well put. Would you say that, that the 10th Mountain Division made the mountains their friend as an ally to help them accomplish what they needed?
That is a good use of the English language, exactly. We knew how to make the mountains our friend in the sense of combat. And of course, we knew how to make the mountains our friend, some of us did even before, through our skiing and in civilian life prior to military service. So it came naturally.
When you were training at Camp Hale, did you have a sense already that you were that the 10th was something special?
Oh yes, but of course. At the time that the 10th was formed, none of us were aware of really the difficulty that it was for C. Minor Dole to sell the Mountain Troop program to the Department of the Army. And those stories came out later. But of course, at that time, we were not necessarily aware that there would be.
We're picking up with the thought that they had no other division.
We were not aware necessarily that it would be the only mountain infantry division formed. And because of that, there was an esprit de corps, because we began to realize after it was known that it was very difficult to sell the mountain infantry to the War Department at the time, that would be the only one. And we got to be very proud of our patch because of that, because there was only one division like us. We were unique. And interestingly enough, apropos of that, we were not allowed to wear our patches on our first, when we landed in Italy. Well, excuse me, we were allowed to wear the patches, but no publicity was to be given the 10th Mountain Division in Italy. And that permission to get publicity was obtained by General Hayes in a personal conversation with his superior officer, in the theater, General Mark Clark, after our first experience on Riva Ridge and Mount Belvedere. And that increased morale immediately.
Oh. I'm going to have you scoot your chair about 2 inches.
Turning which way? To my left or right?
Turning to your left. The placement is good. I just want to change the angle a little more. A little more. The light is, what's happening is the light is changing.
Well, let's see, you know,
yeah, and I just want to make sure that as the light changes, I can adjust you. A little more this way. Yeah, a little more. I need your, I think I'll move you a whole bunch more. Yeah, the light is better. This light, and I'm going to move you forward on that axis, move you forward 4 inches. Yeah, it's perfect. It's much better. It's weird, as the sun is coming around, all of a sudden it's changing.
well, yeah, it's setting, you know, it isn't hung up there or something.
Yeah, I'm going to move you a little bit more towards this table. I have an interesting follow-up question then to that publicity. I had no idea that they had put a kibosh on publicity for you guys.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Now I'm going to have you lean towards the flowers. There we go. We're back. Tell me a little bit about why they had the moratorium on publicity in Italy.
Well, generally, when troops enter the line, it is not. This is during wartime, and the introduction of new divisions into the line is not accomplished because of information given to the enemy. So changes in frontline troops are accomplished without publicity for safety reasons. So when we entered the line, there was no publicity given about the 10th at all. It was just another division. As some of our men were captured, either from patrol activity or beginning with Riva Ridge, of course the enemy knew that there was a mountain division there because that's what our patch said.
Right.
And therefore, at that time, General Hayes, realizing the special nature of this division, realizing what it would do for morale, secured permission from General Mark Clark to publicize the fact that the 10th Mountain Division was in combat in the line in Italy.
Do you think that could partially play into why the 10th was, or Italy was the forgotten front? Because there was a lack of publicity? Is there any connection there?
There could be. But I think, from my experience, which has been with the operations division, with assignments that I've had as a liaison officer, my view is that, in the first place, they needed some troops from Italy to attract some German forces on that section of the front rather than the European front. But the forces in Italy, the U.S. forces and British forces, South African Air Force and so on, all the military forces there, sometimes came in and out. There was some changeover in the numbers and the divisions that occurred in Italy. There were certain times in Italy when the U.S. forces got bogged down, or let's say the whole theater got bogged down, like at Anzio and so forth. And the spot that was needed, you see, to rejuvenate those divisions in action and accomplish missions like capturing Belvedere, see, the 10th Mountain Division was responsible for that. But all of the military operations have political implications. And some of the politics involved in that area concerned Marshal Tito. It concerned military units, like who gets to capture Rome? Is it going to be U.S. forces or some of the British forces, etc.? All of these political forces were in play just as they are today in the use of military.
Do you think that the 10th accomplished more than any other division could have accomplished under those circumstances?
It accomplished more, yes, at the time it accomplished more than any other division could have employed, simply because it recognized and was able to use the terrain. And it's very simple. It really is very simple. That he who commands the high ground controls the area. It's just, that's you would think that would be so obvious, but and we knew those things intrinsically because of our experience in civilian life before that, and also in training in the sense of the use of military tactics involving mountain warfare.
Now, if I recall, you said you entered Camp Hale as a second lieutenant, right?
Correct.
How did your previous experience feed into you being a good leader as a second lieutenant?
Well, my previous experience is I don't know whether I can say this, let's say, from an immodest standpoint, but being concerned athletically throughout my youth in various sports was helpful. Also, in boot camp, military boot camp, basic training, 90 days, you are watched and evaluated by officers and by non-coms as to your ability to lead people. And occasionally they gave you jobs to do during the basic training to determine if you could lead.
Well, let me ask you this. Was leading men in the 10th sort of like herding a, flock of stray cats?
Like,
Was that sort of like trying to herd up a flock of stray cats? I mean, would you say, let me adjust this. Would you say that the 10th Mountain, average 10th Mountain soldier was not average, and was it difficult to lead this particular group?
I wouldn't say it was difficult, no. Not any more difficult than, I guess, an ordinary infantry division. The leadership in the Army obviously is accomplished as it is in civilian life. It's accomplished by knowledge and respect, mutual respect, not necessarily because you're an officer or you're an NCO.
Well, what was the secret to
Not
your
necessarily
success?
because of rank you made a leader. And those, eventually, those qualities, the basic qualities of leadership, will come out as they do in civilian life.
What was the most challenging part of being a leader at Camp Hale for you?
I would say, since any unit in the infantry is being trained for combat or for prospective combat, that you need to make sure that the men are properly trained and realize the importance of training as it's going to contribute to the success of any mission on their own safety. And they must operate as a team, realizing that the communication involved in any unit is the basic means for them to continue to achieve their mission and to do so at the least risk possible. And therefore, to instill this in the men, have them understand that, is probably the principal act of leadership, principal job of leadership.
How did you get them all pulling on the same oar?
Well, they were always eccentrics, you might say, for lack of a more expressive term, but just through training. In one sense, training gets to be routine, and that's what it is. Same thing over and over and over again till everybody finally gets it, so to speak. Yeah. Like life. I can talk a little bit about from the operations standpoint, of the Riva Ridge, Belvedere, Gargulesco, Taracha operation.
Okay.
I can talk a little bit about a personal experience involved as it went during the spring offensive. I can talk a little bit about the Po River crossing. I can talk a little bit about one of the tunnel problems up in there on Lake Garda. I can talk a little bit about the Yugoslav border, because so forth.
Let's do it this
You
way.
know,
Give me some background, operational background on the Riva Ridge, Belvedere, Della Taracha operation, and from your point of view, how you experienced it.
well, should I state to begin with a fact which was, I can state the fact that I was the company commander of L Company, the 86th Mountain Infantry Regiment, for a period of time in 1944, which included the transfer. I was the company commander of L Company of the 86th, the transfer of the division to Camp Swift.
Okay.
And during the preparation for overseas shipment, including the 25-mile marches and all the other details, I was company commander of L Company 86. Shortly before November, as soon as about the time that General Hayes was made commander, the new commander replacing General Jones as the commander of the division. And not because he asked me, but I was transferred from company commander to the G3 operations section of the division as a liaison officer. Liaison with the 86th Regiment only. There was liaison officer for the 87th and one for the 85th. There were three of us. Now, the interesting thing about...
Well, what was your job as liaise? You liaised between...
Well, the job of the liaison officer is to keep contact with those elements of the regiment, the various companies, the battalions, where the units are, their problems, which means you have to spend time in the front lines with them to find out what their problems are and to report back personally their location and so forth. The other interesting thing is about the reason for the liaison officers in the mountains. General Hayes was a liaison officer during the early days of World War II. He was a liaison officer from the U.S. artillery unit that he was a member of with the French artillery. Now, the reason that possibly that he wanted liaison officers in the 10th, because he knew how important liaison was when wire communications and radio communications break down in the mountains. In the mountains, you can't string wire every time an operation occurs. It's just impossible. And then in heavy artillery, it gets broken up anyway. And of course, radio sometimes works in the mountains and sometimes it doesn't. So that's why human beings come in. So that's very important.
Well, explain to me how being a liaison officer during the Riva Ridge, Belvedere, Taracha, what position that put you in and what you saw and experienced as a result.
Well, I wasn't on the climb, but I knew that there was some exploratory activity, patrol activity, to find a way. Once the general made a decision that he was going to take Riva Ridge before Belvedere. And interestingly enough, he was advised not to do that, on a night climb especially, by the G3 officer, Jefferson Irvin. But General says, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it at night. We'll lose less men. Since you people have been mountain trained, he asked the general, yes, so we're going to do it. Routes had to be established. There were 5 routes established. Routes 1 and 3 had fixed ropes. All others didn't require fixed ropes. You know. So that was finally accomplished, which was very unique.
Where were you located during the Riva Ridge operation?
I was back and forth. You're back and forth constantly. You find out what the general needs to know, what you need to know to give him another pair of eyes on that particular unit you're concerned with. But you're never stationed in one position. You go to the front lines and go up front and see what's happening and talk to the officers, talk to the men, and come back and report. That's what you do.
Now, were you in headquarters at all as reports were coming in?
Well, at nighttime I was back in the headquarters, that's right.
And tell me, what was the mood or the sense in the headquarters as reports start filtering in about how the various platoons are doing?
Well, of course, during a night attack, there is little observation, or none. So it had to be between the troops making the climb and those people that were in contact with them. Now, these attacks were accomplished at night. The division had never accomplished anything at night, never been in any attack. And the night attack is obviously because of lack of sight and so forth, and no artillery barrage. So it was just cold turkey. So really knowledge of how far men had gone or had gotten up the climb, nobody had that knowledge except themselves.
Did they radio back in reports of how far they had come, or how far, or when they got to the top?
There was some radio contact, but very little, because radio contact can be intercepted. Yeah. It was only when daylight came that visibility became available, and also arrival at the ridge itself, that there was anybody knew what had happened, you might say.
Well, think back to your time once it got daylight, and here you are, you're the liaison officer. What happened next to you?
Well, I had to come back and report that the companies had achieved their objective, and of course the division, he had received other word, obviously by radio contact at the time, because of the location of the division CP and the intelligence officer. The main thing, of course, about any operation of a unit is the possession of information and the timely dispatch of that information to other people concerned, other people on the team that are concerned. And therefore, the exchange of information is very important, and the timeliness of it is of acute importance. So all I'm saying is, while I was a liaison officer, there were other officers concerned with the communication, like some of the intelligence officers were up front too. This isn't a question of just one person having that responsibility only.
Right.
All other people concerned with the effectiveness of the operation.
Well, what did you experience as you reported in and go out again? What did you
That's
observe?
right. You're continually on the move, contacting units, reporting back in, or getting special assignments, whatever they may be. Mm-hmm. But generally in the mountains, it's where units are, the success they're having, and what are their needs, whatever they may be.
Were you surprised that it went as well as it did?
Yes, I think everybody was surprised. Well, not only surprised, but pleased. Maybe not, I would have to be careful using that word surprised, I think, because I think the men knew that they were going to do it, and the officers that accompanied them were sure they were going to do it. And so I think they were pleased, not necessarily surprised in the sense of the usual definition of the word.
Did you have a sense that this was just the first of many uphill battles where you're fighting your way uphill?
I would think first time in combat, it brings you to attention in the sense that you become more mature immediately. You understand then just what war is all about.
And how did you see that demonstrated?
Well, I don't know if I could see it in maturity, in the sense it's in each person's own psyche and personal feelings, but you begin to understand the severity of it, and the viciousness of it.
Now, tell me how the events unfolded for you as Belvedere, Montegargalesco, and Della Trace unfolded.
Well, the 86 was concerned, not all of the 86, but the 1st Battalion mainly, and the Company F, I think, Percy Rideout's company, on one of the routes. The 85th had the mission of capturing Mount Belvedere. The 87th was on their left, on their flank, and the 1 battalion of the 85th was assigned the mission of getting Mount Gorgoletsko, and another battalion went on to get Taracha. And unfortunately, that battalion went on to Taracha, got bogged down, and it was replaced by the 3rd Battalion of the 86, which was Jack Hayes' battalion.
Now, what did you experience during all that sequence of operations? For you personally, think back. What were you doing, and what were you thinking?
Well, I went up to the front lines, not to the 85th. I wasn't employed with any other regiment except only the 86. And the 86 situation, I was stayed in headquarters, and when they sent the 3rd Battalion up there, that happened so fast that I wasn't sent up there, and on that particular deal. So I can't report that anything involving that I personally was on the ground there on Taracha on that particular deal.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about that operation, Riva to Della Tracia, before we move on?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Nothing comes to mind for the moment.
Did you have a sense that Riva Ridge was a really remarkable operation?
Oh, yes. It was remarkable in many ways. It was remarkable, I think all division personnel took pride in it, even though only 1 battalion.
Did you have a sense that that was an unusual operation?
Oh, yes. And the you might say the quickness with which it was accomplished, and the rapidity and so forth, was a tremendous morale booster, not only to the men concerned, but to the whole division, who were so proud that their fellow members had accomplished that. Not only were they proud, all the Corps headquarters was proud. The theater commander was proud. Here he had an outfit that could do those things. And the enemy was impressed. The Germans were very impressed. After that operation, we were considered by them an elite division. And that term didn't come out until some weeks later, after more operations. And surrendering troops and captured prisoners told us that we were considered an elite division by the German military, which was a tremendous boost, of course, to morale. And we were. They only recognized truth.
So you were hungry, you were muddy. Did you feel elite?
Well, morale is a funny thing. You know, you're undergoing all those problems, but of course, if your morale is high, you put up with them. It doesn't get to you.
Did you feel like morale was high?
The old saying goes, I guess, in the military, which is said before, that when a military morale is great, and you can tell it is great because the men are continually bitching. When they stop bitching, the commanders have to worry about morale. It's interesting, isn't it?
So you'd say morale was high, and
You bet.
and the bitching was high.
Sure. Morale was high because the bitching was high. Let's put it that way.
That's funny. Let's talk a little bit about how General Hayes and Colonel Hampton set an example and how they inspired others.
Well, in the first place, General Hayes had to make a decision, or any officer has to make decisions, so do NCOs, they make decisions. He made the decision to use the 86, elements of the 86 on Riva Ridge. And now there were other, great personnel in the 85th and the 87th, obviously. But he chose the 1st Battalion. And I would think that it would be my view that he valued Hank Hampton as one of his best commanders.
And how did
That's why, he got the assignment.
how did Hank Hampton inspire others?
Well, Colonel Hampton, I never, personally, in the Camp Hale and Camp Swift, I never spent any time other than in the 3rd Battalion, companies in the 3rd Battalion. And Hank Hampton was always in the 1st Battalion, to my knowledge. But I know from talking with officers, since all the officers of the 86 lived in the same barracks, whether it's in Swift or in Hale, why, we used to talk as officers did, and Hank Hampton was always considered to be a driver, a disciplinarian. But of course, that's what the military is all about. And so I assume that he was one of the strong battalion commanders in the division. And so he got the 1st mission, and a very difficult one, which he accomplished. That was he as the leader of it, but it was through his training of the men and the discipline and their knowledge of the terrain and ability, personal physical ability that enabled him to be successful through his men.